Jaguars are up now. Let's see what direction they go in. The Cardinals are now on the clock. Okay, the Giants up now. They're on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. All right, the Packers are now on the clock. Now the Dolphins are on the clock. Who do they have their eye on? Now we turn to the Panthers. They're on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Titans. And now we turn to the Jets. It's their selection. Okay, here we go. The Vikings on the clock now. And now on the clock, it's the 49ers. Okay, it's the Lions now on the clock. The Raiders now on the clock. And now we turn to the Bengals. It's their selection. The Saints are now on the clock. The Chargers now on the clock. Okay, the Bears are on the clock now. The Patriots are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Seahawks. Time is ticking. Now the Seahawks are on the clock. Who do they have their eye on? On the clock now, the Jaguars. It's the Bills now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. On the clock now, the Ravens. On the clock now, it's the Falcons. It's the Cowboys now on the clock. The Rams on the clock now. Now we turn to the Browns. They're on the clock. Okay, next up, it's the Packers on the clock. All right, it's the Eagles now on the clock. And now on the clock, it's the Cardinals. All right, now on the clock, the Chargers. All right, it's the Steelers now on the clock. The Broncos are on the clock now. On the clock now, it's the Dolphins. Time is ticking. And the Panthers on the clock now. Let's see what direction they go. The Jets now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The 49ers on the clock now. What direction will they go? All right, on the clock now, the Lions. The Falcons on the clock now. Let's see who they have their eye on. All right, next up, the Bengals are on the clock. All right, on the clock now, the Saints. Okay, the Chargers up now. They're on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. Okay, it's the Patriots on the clock now. Okay, next up, it's the Seahawks on the clock. And now we turn to the Colts. It's their selection. All right, the Seahawks are now on the clock. On the clock now, the Bears. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Bills on the clock now. What direction will they go? All right, now on the clock, the Texans. The Ravens are now on the clock. Okay, it's the Falcons now on the clock. All right, on the clock now, the Cowboys. All right, now on the clock, the Rams. The Browns are now on the clock. Now the Packers are on the clock. Who do they have their eye on? And the Eagles on the clock now. Let's see what direction they go. All right, now on the clock, the Giants. All right, the Bears are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Broncos, and time is ticking. All right, the Jaguars are now on the clock. turn to the Eagles. They're on the clock. Okay, here we go. The Jets now on the clock. Okay, here we go. The 49ers now on the clock. Okay, here we go. The Raiders now on the clock. Okay, here we go. The Bengals now on the clock. The Saints are on the clock now. What direction will they go? And the Browns on the clock now. Let's see what direction they go in. The Seahawks are on the clock now. All right, next up, the football team on the clock. Okay, the Jaguars are now on the clock. All right, on the clock now, the Bills. On the clock now, it's the Patriots. Okay, the Ravens are on the clock now. All right, next up, the Falcons are on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Rams, and time is ticking. On the clock now, it's the Packers, and time is ticking. Okay, the Eagles on the clock now. The Cardinals on the clock now. What direction will they go? Okay, the Steelers on the clock now. All right, the Dolphins are now on the clock. Okay, the Panthers on the clock now. The Titans now on the clock. The Jets now on the clock. Let's see what they do. All right, it's now the Vikings' turn. They're up. The 49ers now on the clock. The Jaguars are up now. Let's see what direction they go in. Are up now. Let's see what direction they go. All right, next up, the Patriots are on the clock. On the clock now, the Jaguars. On the clock now, it's the Buccaneers. The Jaguars are now on the clock. Okay, it's the Bills now on the clock. And the Texans now on the clock. Who do they have their eye on? Cowboys now on the clock. Okay, it's the Rams up now. They're on the clock. All right, the Jaguars are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Texans. Time is ticking. Okay, the Jaguars are now on the clock. It's the Bills now on the clock. Okay, the Texans up now. They're on the clock. The Jaguars are up now. Let's see what direction they go in. The Bills on the clock now. What direction will they go? The Texans are now on the clock.